So this is the woman my son chose. Mama Rosalind said it the way you say, so this is the problem. Standing in her own doorway, arms folded, eyes moving over Sochi from head to toe like a customs officer deciding whether to let something through. Not welcome. Not come in, my daughter. Not even a smile. Just that. So this is the woman my son chose. Sochi stood on the doorstep with a covered pot of ofiaku she had cooked herself that morning, a wrapped gift under her arm, and a smile she had been rehearsing for 3 weeks. She kept the smile. "Good afternoon, Mama," she said warmly. "It is so good to finally meet you. Daniel has told me so much about you." Mama Rosaline looked at the pot. "You brought food." "Yes, Ma. I made palm nut soup. I hope you..." "My son knows I cook for him when he comes home." She turned and walked inside. She did not hold the door. Daniel Eze caught it before it swung back. He looked at Sochi with an expression she would come to know well in the months ahead. Apology and helplessness wearing the face of love. "She just needs time," he said quietly. Sochi looked at the closed door, at the pot in her hands, at the gift she had spent 4 days choosing. "Okay," she said, and she walked inside. Daniel was 31, an engineer with a telecommunications firm, steady income, the kind of man who remembered birthdays and fixed things without being asked. He loved Sochi with the uncomplicated wholeness of a person who had found the right thing and knew it. He had been with Sochi for 2 years before bringing her home. 2 years of building something real. A relationship so steady and warm and grounded that Sochi sometimes lay awake marveling at the simple fact of it. She was 28, a secondary school biology teacher. Not from money, not from a notable family. She was from Baise. Her father was a retired civil servant. Her mother sold fabrics in the market. She was not flashy. She was not ambitious in the way that filled rooms. She was the kind of woman who remembered what she told her 3 weeks ago and asked how it went. Who cooked, not because she had to, but because feeding people was her love language. Who, when someone was cruel to her, did not reach for cruelty back. She reached for patience the way other people reach for weapons. This quality, which Daniel loved completely, was about to be tested in ways she could not have prepared for. Mama Rosaline was 63, a retired school teacher herself, which should have given her and Sochi common ground and gave them none. She was a woman who raised 2 children alone after her husband died young, who wore that sacrifice like armor and had never taken it off. She had decided what kind of woman her son would marry long before any woman appeared, and Sochi was not it. Not her tribe, not her social class, not the daughter of anyone important, not, and Mama Rosaline said this to her daughter, Adana, in the kitchen on Sochi's first visit, in Igbo, not knowing that Sochi's grandmother was from Onitsha and that Sochi understood every word. The kind of woman who knows her place in a family like ours. Adana was 26, unmarried, sharp-tongued in the way of younger siblings who have learned that humor is easier than softness. She had nothing personal against Sochi in the beginning, but her mother had decided, so Adana decided too. The way people decide things not from conviction, but from loyalty to someone else's conviction. She greeted Sochi with a look up and down that was somehow worse than her mother's. "You are smaller than I thought," she said. "You are exactly how Daniel described you," Sochi replied pleasantly. Adana wasn't sure if that was a compliment. She decided to assume it wasn't. The first visit lasted 4 hours. In those 4 hours, Mama Rosaline refused to eat Sochi's palm nut soup, claiming she had already eaten, then served herself a plate of it when she thought Sochi was in the bathroom. Asked Sochi 3 times what her father did for a living, each time receiving the same answer, each time receiving a that said everything. Told a story about a woman from Baise who had married into a good family and brought her poverty mentality with her and destroyed the whole house. Looking to the middle distance while she spoke, not at Sochi, which was somehow worse. asked Daniel in front of Sochi whether he had thought carefully about his future. Sochi smiled through all of it. Not the brittle smile of someone holding themselves together. The genuine warm smile of a woman who had decided before she arrived that she would not be provoked into becoming someone she wasn't. On the drive back, Daniel reached for her hand. "I'm sorry," he said. "For what?" "Sochi." "She is your mother," Sochi said simply. "She loves you and she's afraid of losing you. I understand that. I'm not going anywhere." Daniel looked at her. "You are the most remarkable person I know," he said. "Take me somewhere with suya. I'm hungry. I didn't eat the soup." He laughed. She laughed. They drove into the evening. The visits continued. Every 2 weeks, because Daniel believed presence built trust and absence built suspicion, and because Sochi agreed with him and was willing to keep trying. Each visit, Sochi brought something: food, a wrapper for Mama, a small gift for Adana. Each visit was received with the particular brand of lukewarm hostility that is worse than open cruelty because it gives you nothing to name. The criticisms were always sideways. Some women know how to dress for a family home. It is good when a wife knows how to be useful. Daniel likes his shirt ironed a certain way. Did he tell you? Always delivered to the air, never to Sochi directly. Never anything she could respond to without seeming oversensitive. And always underneath, you are not enough. You will never be enough. Leave my son alone. Sochi heard all of it, answered none of it. She washed dishes without being asked. She swept the veranda on her third visit. She sat with Mama Rosaline through an entire Nollywood film she had no interest in and asked questions about the plot. She brought Adana's favorite biscuits after mentioning them once in passing. She was building something, slowly, quietly, the way you build things that are meant to last. What she did not know, what nobody told her, was that the same house had broken someone else before her, and that the woman who broke her was still in the walls. Her name was Kemi. Sochi didn't learn about Kemi until the engagement was announced. She learned it from an unlikely source, a cousin of Daniel's named Tobena, who had had too much small stout at the family gathering and decided, in the way of people who have been holding something for too long, to put it down. "You know he almost married someone before," Tobena said. Sochi looked at him. "Before me? 5 years before you. They dated for 2 years. Girl was beautiful, good job, everything. Family liked her. Everyone except Mama and Adana. They made her life hell for 18 months until she couldn't take it anymore. The girl left. Daniel was finished for a long time." Sochi sat with this information for the rest of the evening. Later that night, in Daniel's car going home, she was quiet long enough that he noticed. "What happened?" he asked. She looked at him. "Who is Kemi?" The silence that followed was very long, and in it, Sochi understood several things at once. She understood why he had waited 2 years before bringing her home. She understood the apology that lived permanently behind his eyes. She understood that what she had walked into was not just a difficult mother. It was a pattern that had already claimed one woman and had been patient enough to wait for another. Marosaline began calling Daniel every day. Not about the engagement, about other things: her health, the house roof, a neighbor's dispute, her sister's problems. Each call lasting 40 minutes. Each call placed at times she knew Daniel and Sochi were together. Each call designed not to inform, but to occupy, to fill his attention with her needs, to remind him where his primary loyalty was supposed to live. Adana began appearing at Daniel's apartment unannounced. She had a key. She had always had a key, and in the before Sochi era, this had been unremarkable. Now she used it strategically, arriving when Sochi was cooking and commenting on the meal, arriving when they were going out and lingering until the timing was ruined, sitting in the sitting room until 11 p.m. on a weeknight, talking to Daniel about nothing, looking at Sochi with the small smile of a woman who knows exactly what she's doing. Sochi said nothing. She made Adana tea when she visited. She asked about her work. She complimented her outfits. She was so relentlessly warm and genuine that Adana, who had come prepared for a fight, kept finding herself with nothing to fight. It frustrated Adana more than conflict would have. She's not real, Adana told her friend Bisi. Nobody is that nice. She's performing. Or, Bisi said carefully, she's just nice. Don't be simple, Adana said. Kolade Adeyemi entered the story the way important people often do, without announcement, without fanfare, in the middle of someone else's drama. He was 33, an architect. Adana had met him at a professional event and been immediately attracted to his combination of quiet confidence and the ability to make her laugh without trying. He was not flashy, he was not loud. He was the kind of man who listened with his full attention and remembered what you said and held you accountable to it later in the gentlest possible way. He had met Daniel first, then Mama Rosaline, then Sochi. He had formed his opinions in that order. Of Daniel, a good man carrying more than he should. Of Mama Rosaline, a woman who loves her children the wrong way and has never been told so. Of Sochi, within 15 minutes of their first meeting, watching her absorb a pointed comment from Mama Rosaline with a smile and a kind question in return. This woman is made of something rare. He did not say any of this to Adana immediately. He was patient. He was watching. The moment that changed Kolade's silence into speech happened on a Sunday. A family lunch. Sochi had offered to cook. She always offered. It was her way of contributing, of trying, and had spent the morning making egusi soup and jollof rice from scratch in Mama Rosaline's kitchen. Mama Rosaline supervised. The egusi needs more crayfish. That is not how we do it in this family. You are stirring it too fast. The oil will not settle. Daniel likes his jollof a particular way. Did he tell you? Sochi stared, added, adjusted, smiled, said, "Thank you, Mama," so many times that the phrase began to sound like a kind of breathing. At the table, the food was served. Everyone ate. The jollof was, by any objective measure, exceptional. Mama Rosaline ate 2 full plates, said nothing about the food, then said to the table in general, "I hope when Daniel has children, his wife will know how to keep a proper home. Children need stability, not a woman who is always trying to impress." A silence fell. Daniel opened his mouth. Kolade spoke first. "Mama, I have to be honest with you. Sochi cooked this entire meal from scratch this morning in your kitchen under a significant amount of commentary, and it is genuinely one of the best meals I have eaten in this house. I think she deserves to hear that." Mama Rosaline looked at him. Adana looked at him. Kolade looked at Sochi. "The jollof is outstanding," he said directly to her. "You are an excellent cook." Sochi looked at him for a moment, this man she barely knew, this man who had just done something that her own fiancé had failed to do in 18 months of visits. "Thank you," she said quietly. The table was very still. Adana was staring at Kolade with an expression that was trying to decide whether to be angry or something else. Mama Rosaline returned to her food. She did not respond, but something had shifted in the room. A small thing, the first pebble of an avalanche. That night, Adana confronted Kolade at his car. "You embarrassed my mother," she said. "I told the truth. In her house in front of your family, your mother said something unkind to a woman who has done nothing but try to love this family for 2 years. He looked at Adana steadily. "I like you very much, Ada. You know that. But I need to tell you something, and I need you to hear it as someone who cares about you." She was quiet. "Your mother is going to destroy your brother's marriage, and if you keep following her lead, you are going to help her do it. And the day it falls apart, the day Daniel loses this woman because she finally runs out of patience, you will lose him too, because he will know who stood by him and who stood against her." "I stand by my family," Adana said. "Sochi is about to be your family. The question is whether you'll know that before it's too late." He got in his car. Adana stood in the road and watched him drive away. She was furious. She was also somewhere much quieter, frightened. Because he was right, and she had known it for a while. What nobody knew, what Mama Rosaline had never told anybody, not Daniel, not Adana, not any relative or friend or pastor, was that the girl before Sochi had not simply left. She had been pushed, and Mama Rosaline had been the one doing the pushing. And the reason, the real reason, the one buried under all the talk of tribe and class and she's not right for my son, had nothing to do with Kemi at all. It had to do with a letter that was still in Mama Rosaline's Bible, that Sochi was about to find. Some secrets hide in plain sight, in the place nobody thinks to look, in the book everyone assumes holds only truth. There are women who destroy their children's happiness because they were never happy themselves, and they never know that is what they are doing. They call it love, and in their hearts it is. That is the most painful kind of wrong. Sochi found the letter on a Thursday afternoon in November. She was not snooping, she was not looking for anything. She had arrived at the family house ahead of Daniel. He was stuck in traffic. He had called to say he would be 40 minutes, and Mama Rosaline had let her in and then retired to her room for her afternoon rest, pointing at the sitting room in a way that said, "Sit there, touch nothing, breathe quietly." Sochi had sat for 10 minutes. Then, because she was Sochi, and stillness without purpose was difficult for her, she had offered to dust the sitting room shelves. Mama Rosaline from her room had granted this with a that was not quite objection. She was dusting the bookshelf, a shelf of Mama Rosaline's old school teacher texts, some church materials, a worn King James Bible, when the Bible slipped. She caught it. A folded paper fell from between the pages. She picked it up. She was going to replace it, unread. She genuinely was. Her hand was already moving to fold it back. Then she saw the name at the top. Dear Rosaline. Not Mama, not Mrs. Eze, Rosaline. And the signature at the bottom. She saw it before she intended to, before she could choose not to. Kemi. She should not have read it. She read it. It was dated 3 years ago, 8 months after Daniel and Kemi had ended. It was not an angry letter. That was the thing that broke Sochi open as she stood there in the sitting room with the afternoon light falling through the curtains and the sound of Mama Rosaline breathing in sleep from the other room. It was not an angry letter. It was a sad one. Kemi wrote that she did not hate Mama Rosaline, that she understood in her own way that a mother's fear for her son could make her do things she might not otherwise do. That she was writing not to accuse, but to ask, simply to ask one question. Did Daniel ever know the truth? Did you tell him what you told me? That if I continued the relationship, you would tell him things about my family's financial history that would destroy his image of me? Things you had paid someone to investigate? That you told me I was not good enough, and that you had evidence to prove it, and that you would use it? I am not writing to expose you. I am writing because I want to know if he knows, if he chose to let me go knowing the full story, or if what he lost was taken from him. Either way, I hope he is happy. Kemi. Sochi stood very still for a very long time. The letter in her hands, the afternoon light, the sound of a sleeping woman in the next room who had investigated a young girl's family finances and used the findings as a weapon, who had threatened a woman to leaving her son, and who had never told Daniel any of it, who had let him believe Kemi had simply grown tired, who had let him carry that wound for 3 years, who had let him sit with the quiet shame of not having protected someone, not knowing the real enemy had been inside the house. She heard Mama Rosaline stir. She folded the letter, replaced it in the Bible, put the Bible back on the shelf, and sat down on the sofa with her hands in her lap and her face perfectly composed by the time Mama Rosaline appeared in the doorway, in her house clothes, looking at Sochi with the usual expression. Is Daniel not here yet? He's on his way, Mama. Can I make you tea? She did not tell Daniel that night. She needed to think. She was not, and this was important, she told herself, she was not going to use the letter as a weapon. She was not going to march it into a confrontation and burn the house down with it. That was not who she was. That had never been who she was. But she needed to understand what she was dealing with. This was not a woman who disliked her because of tribe or class. This was a woman who demonstrated, in writing, through evidence, with full deliberate planning, that she would go to any lengths to control who her son loved. Which meant Sochi was not in a difficult family relationship. She was in a campaign, and the campaign had been running for a long time before she arrived. She called Tobeno, not because she trusted him with the letter. She told him nothing about the letter, but because he was the only person in the family who spoke plainly to her, and plain speaking was what she needed. She said, carefully, when Daniel and Kemi ended, was there ever any talk about why? What really happened? A pause. There were rumors, Tobeno said slowly. What kind? That Kemi didn't just leave, that she was managed out. He was quiet. I never had proof. I asked Daniel once later. He said Kemi told him she wanted different things. He believed her. He believed her, Sochi repeated. You know Daniel. He trusts people. He especially trusts his family, Sochi said. Yes. She told Daniel on a Saturday morning. Not the letter itself, not yet, but Kemi, what Tobeno had suggested. The question of what he actually knew about why that relationship ended. Daniel was quiet for a long time. She said she wanted different things, he said. And you believed her. Why wouldn't I? Did you ever ask your mother? He looked at her. Sochi, I am not accusing anyone, she said gently. I am asking you a real question. Did you ever sit with your mother and honestly ask her what really happened between her and Kemi? They didn't get along. Daniel, she took his hand. I need you to hear me carefully because I love you and I will never lie to you. She looked at him directly. I think your mother has more to do with what happened to Kemi than you know. I cannot tell you the full details yet because the details are not mine to bring to you. But I need you to be open to the possibility that the story you were told is not the whole story. He was silent. And I need to know, she said quietly, that if the truth comes out, all of it, you will be able to stand in it with me. He looked at her for a long moment. What do you know, Sochi? I know enough to be careful, and I know enough not to walk away from you because of it. The confrontation happened because of Adana. Not because Sochi planned it, not because the letter was produced, but because Adana, who had been sitting with Kolade's words for 3 weeks, who had been watching Sochi with different eyes since the Sunday of the jollof rice, who was slowly, painfully doing the work of a person reviewing their own behavior and not liking what they found, asked her mother a question. Mama, what really happened with Kemi? Mama Rosaline was in the kitchen. She did not stop what she was doing. She said she left. Why? Because she was not right for Daniel. Mama, I'm asking you what happened. Mama Rosaline put down the knife. She turned. Why are you asking me this? Because Kolade asked me something, Adana said. He asked me if I was sure I knew the full story of this family before I defended it. And I have been thinking about it. And I realize I don't. I don't actually know what happened to Kemi. She left. Did you make her leave? The silence that followed was the longest Adana had ever sat inside with her mother. And in it, in the quality of her mother's stillness, in the way Mama Rosaline turned back to the vegetables without answering, Adana got her answer. Mama, she said softly. Her voice had changed. It was not accusatory. It was the voice of a daughter who has just understood something that cannot be understood and walked away from. Mama, what did you do? The truth, when it finally moved in that kitchen, moved slowly, the way old things move, the way things move that have been holding still for a long time and have run out of reasons to keep doing so. Why? Daniel asked it standing in his mother's kitchen the following Sunday, with a letter on the table between them. Not how could you, not I can't believe this, just why? Sochi had given him the letter the previous night. She had sat beside him while he read it. She had not spoken. She had let the words do what words do when they are finally allowed to move freely after years of being folded up in a Bible. When he finished, he put the letter down very carefully on the table. He sat for a long time. His face was doing something complicated and private, and she did not try to name it. How long have you had this? He asked. 3 weeks. Why didn't you? Because I needed to be sure I understood it before I brought it to you, and because I needed to know what I wanted the outcome to be. She looked at him. I don't want to destroy your family, Daniel. I never wanted that. I want to be part of it, but I cannot be part of something that was built on a lie about someone else who deserved better. He looked at her. What do you want to happen? He asked. I want your mother to tell you the truth herself, Sochi said. Not from the letter, from her mouth. I want her to look at you and tell you what she did and why. Because until she does that, nothing between any of us will ever be real. And if she won't? Sochi was quiet for a moment. Then we will know exactly what we are dealing with, she said, and we will make decisions accordingly. The Sunday gathering was not planned as a confrontation. It was a regular family lunch. Kolade was there, Adana was there. Tobena had come with his wife, and Sochi, sitting at that table with her hands folded and her face composed and her heart beating at a pace she was working hard to control. After the food, after the plates were cleared, Daniel put the letter on the table. Why? Mama Rosaline looked at the letter. She looked at it the way you look at something you buried and are not surprised to see her surfaced, because buried things always do. She did not deny it. This was the thing that Sochi had not expected, had feared and hoped for simultaneously. Mama Rosaline looked at the letter, looked at her son's face, and did not deny it. I was protecting you. From what? Daniel's voice was quiet, dangerously quiet. From a woman who was not, from a woman I loved, he said. From a woman I wanted to build a life with. You investigated her family, you threatened her, you made her believe she had no choice but to leave, and then you let me spend 3 years thinking she chose to go. She was not right for you. That was not your decision to make. I am your mother. You are my mother. His voice broke slightly on it and recovered. And you used that. You used my love for you as cover for something that was not love. You called it protection, you called it wisdom. But what you did to Kemi was not protection, Mama. It was control. And what you have done to Sochi for 2 years is the same thing wearing a different face. Mama Rosaline looked at the table. I only ever wanted what was best for you, she said. I know, Daniel said. And the weight in those two words, the grief, the love, the terrible complexity of being someone's child, made the room very still. I know you believe that, and I know you love me. But Mama, love that controls is not love. It is fear. And I need you to understand that I see the difference, even if you can't. The silence that followed was long. Adana broke it. I owe Sochi an apology, she said. Everyone looked at her. She was looking at Sochi, not at her mother, not at Daniel, at Sochi directly. I followed my mother's lead without asking whether her lead was worth following. I was unkind to you, consistently, without cause. And I told myself it was loyalty to my family. She paused. Kolade told me something. He said the question is whether I'll know Sochi's family before it's too late. She looked at Kolade briefly, looked back at Sochi. I don't want it to be too late, she said. Sochi looked at Adana, at this woman who had made her feel unwelcome in every room they shared, who had looked at her sideways and said sharp things and eaten her cooking without acknowledging it, who was now sitting with the discomfort of seeing herself clearly for the first time. It would have been easier to be cold, to say too little, too late, to make her earn it in visible, measurable ways. Sochi leaned across the table, and she took Adana's hand. She didn't say anything at first, just held it. I know, she said finally. I know. Adana pressed her lips together, nodded. Kolade across the table looked at Sochi with an expression of simple respect. Mama Rosaline did not apologize that day. She was too old and too armored and had been right about everything in her own understanding for too long to dismantle that in a Sunday afternoon. But she did something. Toward the end, when the conversation had softened, when tea had been made, when the terrible tension had settled into something that was not resolution exactly, but was the beginning of the space resolution needs, she looked at Sochi and she said, the egusi you made last month, what did you put in it? Sochi looked at her. Uziza leaves and a little edeko koyam to thicken. I thought so, Mama Rosaline said. My own mother used to do that. She looked away, said nothing more. It was not an apology, but it was an opening. And Sochi, patient, warm, stubbornly gentle Sochi, understood what an opening was. She would not waste it. 3 months later, Sochi asked Mama Rosaline to teach her to make ofe ogiri, the old woman's soup, the one that Daniel grew up eating, the one that lived in his memory as the smell of home. She asked in person on a Saturday morning, sitting in the kitchen. Mama Rosaline looked at her for a moment. Then she stood up, moved to the store, and began pulling out ingredients. She did not say yes. She did not make a speech. She just began to teach. They stood side by side at the stove for 3 hours. Mama Rosaline corrected Sochi twice. Sochi accepted both corrections without flinching. At the end, when the soup was done, Mama Rosaline tasted the soup, set the spoon down, and said, "Not bad." From Mama Rosaline, those 2 words were a standing ovation. Sochi ducked her head to hide her smile. The wedding was in April, small and warm and full of the kind of joy that has been earned, not assumed. Adana was maid of honor. She had asked to be, actually asked, sitting in Sochi's kitchen one evening, looking slightly mortified by her own request, and Sochi had said yes before she finished the sentence. Kolade sat in the front row. He proposed to Adana 2 weeks after the wedding, in the middle of a very ordinary Tuesday, handing her a ring while she was eating indomie and telling her she was the most frustrating and fascinating woman he had ever met, and he intended to spend the rest of his life being driven moderately insane by her. She said yes with noodles still in her mouth. It was the most honest moment of her adult life. Mama Rosaline danced at Daniel's wedding. Not the full, abandoned dancing of a woman with no reservations, the careful dancing of someone who is learning late that joy does not have to be earned through control. Sochi caught her eye once across the dance floor. Mama Rosaline held her gaze for a moment. Then she looked away. Then she looked back. And for the first time, the very first, she gave Sochi something she had never given her. A nod. Small, barely visible. The kind of nod that says, I see you. You held when I pushed. You stayed when I made staying difficult. You chose my son and did not weaponize your goodness, even when you had every right. Sochi pressed her hand briefly to her chest and turned back to her husband.